When we think of animals in the wild being captured, we must be careful not to think of them as being hunted. The hardest of all the animals to capture is the elephant. 5 men will surround the beast and let it know that they intend to catch it, but not to kill it. If at any moment it looks like there is to be danger or death to either man or beast, the operation is cancelled and the beast is free to go. Go and save someone else, my body is broken. Please save the children. Unknown man, unknown woman. Unknown man, unknown woman. Unknown child. It's a fun place. It's electric. It's a spectacle. It was one of the biggest disasters to hit the USA. Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. Okay, right. So for a long time now, I have been searching for a story around this particular subject, and I have finally found it. Ye bloody ha. If you were to hear, right, this little bit of a tune, where would we be, right? Yes, of course. Where are we? We're at the circus. We are at the circus. Clowns, jugglers, trapeze artists. It is time for a story involving the circus, but also involving forward thinkers, incredible people, and a major and devastating disaster. Are you ready? Okay, let's go. The circus. I bloody love the circus. Well, I say that, right? I say that, but these days, I mean, I think the circus is a bit tame these days. I mean, it's fine, you know, it's okay to go and watch, but it's a bit sort of sanitized, which, you know, I understand because, of course, you know, you can't be asking people to endanger their lives, or, you know, and I would never want to see animals go through any sort of cruelty, but I think I like the old idea of the circus, you know, where it just was a bit sexier. Do you know what I mean? It was just a bit more, it was just a bit more electric. It just had a bit more of a thing about it. Like, you know, my idea of this sort of circus that I'd want to go to is like fire breathing lions, trapezes, jugglers, juggling on broken glass, people dangling in hoops while a monkey chases them, that kind of thing. I don't know, but that kind of circus. Well, that is the kind of circus that we are going to. But it also involves one of the most harrowing stories of an absolute disaster that happened. Now, before we get there, we are going to start with a photographer. And we're starting in 1850. A long time ago. I was but a boy. We're starting with a photographer, and he's called John Beazley Green. And now what he does is he travels the world and he photographs animals. That was his thing, taking photos of animals all around the world. He would travel country to country with his camera, always looking for like exotic animals, interesting animals, wherever he went. Can you imagine how much this man would these days, right? If you're an animal photographer, how much would he have fucking loved Instagram and Facebook these days? He would be loving his life. This man was, I think, early Instagram. Anyway, here he is. Here's John, and he's travelling around with his camera. I'm imagining it's one of those one of those 1850 old things where you put a cloak over yourself and smoke came out of it. So, he's travelling through Germany and he's looking for exotic animals to document. Hamburg, to be precise. And it's when he's here in Hamburg looking for animals that he develops an interest in animal trainers. You know, the people who buy huge animals, elephants, monkeys, horses, zebras, whatever, and they train them to be performing animals. So he goes with his camera and he will find, trainers who've got a goat, 2 baby elephants, a monkey. He'll take some photographs and he goes on his merry way. Now for John the photographer, that's fine. Okay, that's fine. But he's looking for more. He's looking for something more exciting. He wants pictures of animals, and specifically animals that maybe the world hasn't seen in photographs before, or animals doing things which are astounding. Now the reason that he's in Germany is that during the late 1800s there was a massive amount of trade in exotic animals. For some reason, I don't know why it happened in Germany, but that seemed to be the place where a lot of animals were brought to be sold or traded for other animals. Now, obviously, there's a lot of cruelty involved in the trading of animals, and we're all animal lovers. I am. Well, except for the fucking birds. They can all just die instantly. But every other kind of animal. But there would have been a lot of cruelty at that time around animals. And thankfully, we've moved on as people. And we know how to treat animals better now. So here's John. He's in Germany. He's about to leave Germany. He's about to head to Egypt. When someone says to him, "Have you ever heard of a man called Carl Hagenbeck?" And he says, "No. Who in the hell is Carl Hagenbeck when he's at home?" Well, it's explained to John that right there in Hamburg there is a man called Carl Hagenbeck who was training animals, and he was pushing boundaries within that. He was training animals in a way that they had never been trained before to do incredible things. And we're talking big animals. We're not talking a couple of camels and a goat. We're talking bears. We're talking hyenas. We're talking like big, big animals. So, John the photographer is fucking beside himself with excitement with this news. He's like, I must go and find this man, Carl Hagenbeck. I've got to go and find him. And so he sets out on a search. So when he's travelling to try and find where he is, he tells people what he's looking for. And this is the response he gets. And it's really interesting. People start saying, oh, you mean the Hagenbeck Zoo? Is that what you're looking for? And he goes, well, hang on, I didn't know it was a zoo. And also, in 1850, what is a zoo? The word zoo didn't really exist. Zoological did exist as a word, of course, but the term zoo, as we would now recognise it, didn't really exist. Yeah, I don't know when the term zoo actually came to be a thing. I think it was around about this time. Although, I mean, obviously, I'm wary to guess at what time that might have been, because I think that we've all learned from the last episode when I tried to guess what year World War II started and fucked it right up, that clearly I am no good at guessing when things began. However, I do think it might have been about this time that the zoo started. So now, this photographer, he is even more intrigued. And after a few weeks of searching, he tracks down the man, Carl Hagenbeck. And when he does, he is in for quite a surprise. He discovers that this man, Carl Hagenbeck, has indeed built a zoo. And this is a very, very popular, his zoo in Germany. Germans are flocking to see it. People are travelling everywhere to find it. And why? Well, it was the very, very early idea of what a zoo could be. And it contains animals that Carl Hagenbeck had trained. And they include lionesses balancing balls on their nose, a tiger riding a metal tricycle, a goat dragging a carriage in which there was a family of Sphinx cats. Dogs were being trained to interact with bears. There were cheetahs involved in his act. Now, it all sounds insane, and it was, because this just... what was this? Like, this was new. This was brand bloody new. And this photographer's mind was blown. He documented all of it in his journals, and Carl Hagenbeck, he allowed him to take some photographs. But the bottom line was this. Whatever other people were doing in the world with animal training, Carl Hagenbeck was next level. He was extra. He was the Beyonce of this world. The rest, they were your Kelly and Michelle's. Carl Hagenbeck was the first man in the world to ever create an animal pyramid. Now, an animal pyramid, I'm sure you might have seen images of them. They're these like incredible pyramids where you have like bears, elephants, monkeys, and then you sort of get like smaller animals go up to the top of the pyramid. Crazy, big fucking things. I mean, I can't imagine what it must have been like to even try and create that. Imagine that being like, okay, So I want the monkey on the top, and I want the goat to tap dance on the head of the camel. You'd just be like, what the actual fuck? So, I mean, I already said it, but Carl Hagenbeck was doing something that nobody around the world was doing anywhere else. Here's an important note for all you animal lovers. These early zoos, yes, they were deemed a place where animals were treated in a really cruel and horrible way. And I understand that, and any cruelty to animals, I cannot support it. Don't, no, just no. But, even in this early time, and now we're talking now 1850s and early 1900s, Carl Hagenbeck, not only was he creating things that no one else was, he was also doing it in a very, very different way. He was using a reward-based training system. So, whilst anyone else who was training animals was using fear-based training, so whipping animals, starving them, Hagenbeck was going about it in a completely different way. He was using a reward system based on food, basically. So he would, use food as a reward to get the animals to perform in the way that he wanted. And I don't mean that like he was starving them otherwise until they did the act. I mean, he was treating them kindly. He was treating them the way that they should be treated, but they were getting these extra rewards if they did this particular thing that they, that he wanted them to do. I mean, it's still dodgy. Yes, of course it is. I completely understand that. You shouldn't really ever be making a bear ride a bike. You shouldn't ever really be making a goat pull a lion on a fucking chariot. But, it was happening. It does exist. It did exist. And that was his method. Right, I have to stop here and tell you about Alfie, my dog, who's currently on my knee as I record. Say hi, Alfie. Alfie, say hello. Nah, nothing. But this is what I'm talking about, right? I got Alfie 10 years ago, right? And he was a wee 9-month-old pup. And he hadn't been trained in anything. And I tried my best to train him, right? And I did. But this is what's so fascinating. Alfie knows all of the things that you should do as a dog, right? But he just chooses not to do them, really. If I say to Alfie, sit, he just looks at me like, right, well, I hear what you're saying, but, I'm just not going to bother doing that. I'm just not going to bother doing that. If I'm like, Alfie, down off of that, don't stand on that. Nah, he just looks at me like, yeah, I can see what you're trying to get me to do, but I'm not really going to bother. I mean, just going to do my own thing. I'm just totally going to I'm just going to do me. But if I have a hint of food on me, even the slightest, he's like, oh, suddenly, oh yeah, okay, what is it you want? Right, I'll do everything you want. Oh no, he's put his ears down, like, oh no, why have you said my name 5 times in a row? So, this photographer, John, he's seen this place. It's a bit of a well-kept secret. And he takes all these photographs. And whatever this thing is that Carl Hagenbeck is, this photographer is determined that the world needs to know this place exists. So how did Carl Hagenbeck end up in the situation where he was running this zoo, if you want to call it a zoo, that had at that point 400 animals in it? How? Well, Carl Hagenbeck's dad had been a butcher, a seller of meat, and he ran a really successful butcher's in Germany. And so the young Carl, aged 5 or 6, he would help his dad in the shop. And that was fine. But Carl's dad, he wanted to branch out into something else. He wanted to acquire as many exotic animals as he could from around the world and display them in his butcher shop. They were live. I mean, he wasn't bringing them and killing them. He just wanted to get all these exotic animals and put them in his shop. I mean, of course, the 5-year-old Carol, this was incredible. Can you imagine, like, seeing at a young age all these wonderful animals that you've never seen coming in to your dad's shop, and he would display them in the window? I think, imagine what that was like if you lived round about there at that time. You'd be like, right, I'm just going down to the butcher's, just going to get myself some sausages. Oh my God, there's a dancing fucking peacock in the window. You'd be like, that's weird. But it was popular. People really, really liked it. So you can see why Carl Hagenbeck had this fascination and where his sort of life's work began. When his dad died, Carl took over the butcher shop. But very quickly he sort of ditched that and he was like, no, I'm all about the animals. I'm all about the exotic animals. And he took to the trading business. In about his mid-20s, there was an explosion in Germany of animals being traded back and forth. And again, I don't know why Germany was the place that it happened, but it was. So, Carl Hagenbeck in his mid-20s, get this. He had traded at least 1,000 lions, 300 to 400 tigers, 600 to 700 leopards, 1,000 bears in different varieties, and almost 800 hyenas. That is fucking an insane level of animals to be trading, to be making money on. He sold 17 rhinoceroses. King hell. Now, had all of these animals been treated well? No, they hadn't. No, let's just be honest about it. No, they hadn't. Baby animals were being ripped from their mothers only days old. And plenty of animals were dying from the trauma of being removed from their natural world and being transferred around the world. Now, you remember I said a minute ago that the interesting thing about how Carl Hagenbeck was working is that he was using the reward system. Well, that was fine when he was a little bit older and he'd created this zoo in Germany. In his younger years, he was a little less caring about the animals. Quite frankly, a few dead rhinoceros here and there, a few dead elephants didn't really bother him. He was making, at that point, so much money. He didn't care. And by the time, he got round to training them, he wasn't using cruelty, but in his trading days, he didn't really care. So for the purposes of research, I bought Carl Hagenbeck's book. And it's a really fascinating read. It's really, really interesting. One of the things he talks about largely is the capturing of animals. And he says, when we think of animals in the wild being captured, we must be careful not to think of them as being hunted. They are not prey to be killed. He says, take the elephant as the best example. The hardest of all animals to capture. it takes between 4 and 5 men per elephant, and there is an agreement made between man and beast. The 5 men will surround the beast and let it know that they intend to catch it, but not to kill it. If at any moment there looks like there is to be danger or death to either man or beast, the operation is cancelled and the beast is free to go. I mean, that's fine, but it doesn't really excuse it, does it? It doesn't. I mean, it sounds like he's sort of trying to make capturing of animals sound a little bit like, oh, I'm just going to put a glossy spin on it. Nah, it doesn't sound that great to me. So, here he is. He has this crazy amount of animals, but he's given up the trading and he just wants to concentrate on the zoo. So, Carl Hagenbeck, he really is the father of what we now know to be the zoo, in terms of not animals doing tricks, but just having a huge variety of animals. But knowing he had something really, really special, he started selling lots of tickets for people to come and see. And it was a moneymaker. People were coming in. They were like, oh, I want to see that bear. Oh, I want to see. I've heard that there's hyenas. I've heard that there's this, that, and the other. And they wanted to come and see. But then Carl Hagenbeck got another idea. He started thinking, what if I was to involve people in this situation? What if I was to start involving human beings? What if those people who can balance on small spaces, who can do all sorts of tricks, could do them around animals at the same time? So he started to find some talented acrobats and jugglers, and well, I suppose that's what we would call them now. At the time, I don't know if the language was exactly the same, but yeah, basically people who could do these tricks or do these incredible things with their bodies. He wanted to bring together the animals and the performing people and create these new shows. He didn't know what these were, but basically Carl Hagenbeck, what he didn't know was he was inventing the circus. He was basically inventing what we now know to be the circus. And it was so popular. It was a crazy, crazy level of popular as a form of entertainment. People were going bananas to see. People were going bananas. I don't think I've ever said the words people were going bananas in my life anyway. Basically, people were into it, is what I'm trying to say. Folk were up for it. They wanted to see it. Carl Hagenbeck's now circus became so famous. People were travelling miles and miles to come and see this. This park that he had. Some of these animals were becoming so famous in their own right. People were making dolls out of them and selling them throughout Germany. People, who had skills like your contortionists, your jugglers, your fire breathers, all of these people, they all wanted to be employed in the Carl Hagenbeck circus because it was so big. However, as we know, whenever something becomes really big and really successful, people will also just want to tear it down. I mean, it's kind of why my career as a international pop star has never really taken off, because people always want to knock down the big apple. Or is that the phrase? No, it's not the phrase. People always want to shoot the big fish in a pond or something. I don't know. It's a phrase like this. I don't quite know what it is. Anyway. I'm kidding, obviously. So right at the height of the success of the famous Hagenbeck circus, it comes under attack from people who say that animals are being treated badly, and Hagenbeck will say, no, they're not. No, they are not. I can assure you, I use reward-based training. I don't hurt these animals. And so there's a really sort of strange thing happens here, because whilst the circus is bringing him lots of money and people are flocking to see it, he takes this idea that he's actually hurting animals quite badly, and he decides, do you know what? I just don't really want to do the circus anymore. If this is what people think that I'm doing to animals, I don't want to do it. So he's just not enjoying it. He just goes, no, I'm not into it anymore. And he says, I'm going to sell the Hagenbeck circus. I'm going to sell every animal, every performer, every costume, every bloody juggling ball, everything. Just let it go. Doesn't want it anymore. And he sells it for $1 million now. He sells it in 1907. $1 million. I can't even imagine what that would be in today's money. He sells it to a man called Benjamin Wallace. All of the legal bits of it, the handling, the drawing up of agreements, that all happens, but crafty old Carl, he insists on one thing. He insists that the name Hagenbeck always be attached to the circus. Wherever it goes, whatever happens, he demands that the name Hagenbeck remains attached. He won't sell it otherwise. And so the guy who's buying it, Benjamin Wallace from America, well, Benjamin Wallace has no option but to agree. He says, yep, fine, okay, fine, fuck it. You can have your name attached. No worries. So that's it. So Carl Hagenbeck, having spent all that time building that up, just goes, no, I don't want it anymore. I just don't want it. Sell it on. And this is what's interesting about Carl Hagenbeck, is he came under such attack because people said, oh, you treat animals cruelly, you do all these things. And actually, that's what really fucking got to him in the end. He just went, no, I don't. I actually don't treat animals like shit. I don't do that. What he actually did was, once the circus was gone, he opens, and again, another first for Carl Hagenbeck. He is a forward thinker. He opens an animal sanctuary in Germany, in which animals are allowed to roam freely around the space, and they're not kept in cages, and the public can come and they can view, but it's always from a distance. And again, that had never existed, but Carl, he put that in place. And so now, the circus becomes known as the Wallace Hagenbeck Circus, and it is about to become one of the most famous circuses in the world, but for all the wrong reasons. The man who had bought the circus, Benjamin Wallace, he was born in Pennsylvania, USA. And in a nutshell, basically, his story is that when he was really young, he had an interest in magic. He was one of these kind of wheeler-dealer types, you know. He was always like trading people for, like, you know, better little bits of circus equipment. All these friends were into like doing tricks and doing magic, and he was always like trying like buy their magic tricks off them and like whatever. First of all, he was interested in being a magician, and then he was like, no, actually I think I'm quite interested in the circus, blah 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 blah. Yeah, so he was buying and selling equipment as he was sort of a teenager, and then he sort of stayed on that path, and then by the time he was a bit older, he had found his way into a business where he was buying and selling bits and pieces of magicians, circus, entertainment equipment, and building up quite the massive collection. And then he started to move into companies where he was getting just a little bit more power here and there. He was getting a little bit more money coming his way because he was, trading. Oh, I'll sell you this trapeze artist for that monkey that you've got over there or whatever. And so by the time the Hagenbeck Circus went up for sale, he literally begged, borrowed and stole to get £1 million so that he could buy the Hagenbeck Circus, because he was like, I want that, I'm going to make that into something fucking amazing. We've had Carl Hagenbeck, who was essentially the father of the zoo, the circus and the animal sanctuary. But Benjamin Wallace, who now was in charge, was about to be the father of something else that we never really had before, and that was the travelling circus. Circuses which packed all their stuff up onto a train, put everything there, went on a journey, rocked up into a new town, performed for 2 days, and then packed everything back up again, and on they went. And now, for Benjamin Wallace, he had everything that Carl Hagenbeck had worked for. He had all these animals that were trained to perfection, he had top class performers, and he was able to travel around the USA with this travelling circus, basically. And for him, that was a dream. Money was flooding in. Around about that time, there were 2 other circuses in the world, and they were of sort of similar scale. They caught up very quickly to what Carl Hagenbeck and Benjamin Wallace were doing. Barnum and Bailey was one of them, I seem to remember. I can't remember the name of the other one, but you'll have heard of Barnum and Bailey. But yeah, so we're talking big here. We're talking like huge. The Wallace Hagenbeck Circus was considered to be in the top 3 circuses in the world. There were a total of 400 performers, and they ranged from animal tamers to gymnasts to dancers to contortionists to jugglers, fire breathers. You had all these animals, basically everything that you can imagine that's that huge spectacle. They also had 100 roustabouts. Well, what in the hell is a roustabout? I kept coming up against this term. I was like, the fuck is a roustabout? So I was like, every time I look at this circuit, I keep seeing roustabout. So basically, a roustabout is the general term for a labourer, the men, and I say men because they were men, mainly men, who would be responsible for the construction of the circus when it arrived in the next town. They would be your joiners, your builders, your, that kind of thing. But just kept seeing the word roustabout and going, imagine you're at a party and someone's like, what do you do? Oh, I'm a doctor. What do you do? Oh, I'm a chef. You, my good fellow, what do you do? I'm a roustabout. Oh, great. Okay. Yes. I went to Circus University and I did a degree in roustaboutry. So, this Wallace Hagenbeck Circus, it travelled everywhere. There were 24 carriages of train to transport the animals, the performers, the costume, the equipment. And when it arrived in a new town, people in their hundreds came to see it because they were just blown away by the sort of incredible acts that they were watching. And people were juggling fire, standing on the back of elephants. There were tightrope walkers balancing above teams of lions. No, hang on. It's not teams of lions, is it? What's the... It's not... Oh, whoa, hang on. What's the term? Oh, it's pride. Pride of lions, isn't it? Is that right? I think you call it a pride of lions. Oh, I just made that sound a bit gay. No, it is Pride of Lions. I'm sure it is. Anyway, that's what I'm trying to say. It's like just absolutely huge. So, massive spectacle. So that's what it looked like from the outside. What was it like inside the circus? Well, I mean, I suppose to say the circus is like one big family just sounds really cheesy. Just sounds like, oh, come on. But, you know, I think maybe it was. I don't know if it is now, but, well, I don't know because I'm not part of one. But, I'm guessing. Imagine if you're together all day, every day, with the same performers, then, you know, you're travelling, you're working, relationships, you know, they must be really close. It was really common at the time for families to be a part of a circus. So, like, you would have lots of, like, generations of all of the same family part of the circus. You know, all, like, skilled in, like, different things. But they would sort of be working together as a troupe. Now, one of these families were the Feldman family. So, Mr. and Mrs. Feldman and their two young children, they had a boy and a girl. Now, all four of them were clowns. I love that. A family of clowns. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. That must have been so much fun. A travelling family of clowns. I just imagine them all in like a sort of comedy car, all wearing like big shoes and colourful wigs, being like look at us, we're clowning about. Well, that's maybe more the modern idea of the clown. We are talking early 1900s. Now, when they weren't clowning as a four, Mrs. Feldman, she was a trapeze artist and a tightrope walker. And Mr. Feldman, he would juggle, and he would also perform tricks with the tigers. And they're two young kids. And their two young kids, they would help with the older sort of artists, and they would help them do their tricks. So, you know, all a big part of the show. There was this sort of, I think it's quite interesting, there was a sort of competitive business amongst all of the circuses where the three main circuses in the world were all trying at the same time to buy performers from each other. So the Feldman family had been approached by both other huge circuses and asked if they would come and work for them. And they said no. They were happy at the Hagenbeck Wallace Circus. But, you know, I think it's interesting. It's like people were trying to like steal a particular trapeze artist from one place, a contortionist from another. I guess probably the best sort of analogy. Analogy? What the hell's an analogy? The best kind of analogy would be thinking about like sports teams trying to buy the best players for their team. I say that like I know anything about sports, but you know what I mean. It was a bit like that. So if you had one who could juggle fire while standing on the back of a lion, other circuses would come and go, oh, I'll offer you the big money to come and work for me. But the members of this circus, they remained largely loyal. They really enjoyed the sort of family nature. They enjoyed the travelling across the USA together, and they were really close. Now let's go to the travelling aspect, because this is where it's going to take a very, very dark turn. In order for the Wallace Hagenbeck Circus to travel to the next big city, as I said earlier, it took 24 train carriages. So this is early 1900s. And train tracks, they were beginning to exist all across the USA. Cities were being connected all over the place. And in those days, it was the big old wooden trains that were lit by gas lamps. You know the kind of thing that I mean. You can see it in your head. You know the thing I mean. So, in order to get to the next place that they were travelling to, the whole circus gets packed up, and that includes animals. The animals were packed in to train carriages, and they were usually sent ahead of the performers. So what you'd have is these 24 like carriages of a train, and say like maybe the first 10, 15 were full of animals. You'd send them on to the next city, and then behind that would be the performers, the equipment, the roustabouts. They would be there too. And so, with each new place that they were going to, there was such anticipation about the Wallace Hagenbeck Circus arriving. People were literally beside themselves with excitement, because, as the old saying goes, the circus was coming to town. It was so exciting. Now, one of the places that they were heading to was Hammond, Indiana. And in that town, there was a 5-year-old boy called Warren Reeder. And Warren was 5 years old, and he had heard great tales of how fucking exciting this circus was going to be, and he couldn't believe his luck, because the circus was coming to town. Warren, at 5 years old, did not sleep the night before. The circus was to come out of sheer excitement, like almost like Santa is coming levels of excitement. The town was in a frenzy. Any minute now, these train carriages would be pulling in. Little did they know, the Wallace Hagenbeck Circus wouldn't arrive, because one of the greatest disasters in the US history was about to happen. As the performers and the roustabouts of the circus slept in their train carriages, travelling towards Indiana, it was 4 a.m. in the morning. The animals, they had been sent on ahead, and 210 people were packed into the train carriages, travelling on the tracks. Now, it was the dead of night. And as they're travelling, the train driver, he starts to think, there's an odd sound coming from the engine. Nothing terribly alarming, but something that he maybe thinks, I might just need to deal with that just now. So he makes a decision, and the decision is that he's going to stop the train. Now, the train he's driving is 6 carriages in total. There's 210 people packed into those 6 carriages, with equipment and props and costumes and the lot. And they're all pretty much asleep because, it's the absolute dead of night. But he thinks, okay, no, I'm going to stop and just see if I can just fix the thing that I think might be wrong, and it's a simple fix. Now, being a very responsible train driver, he does exactly what you should do. He alerts the central signal office to tell them that he's temporarily stopping. It'll only take 10 minutes, but he needs to fix a small issue. And they say, okay, that's fine. No worries, no problems. They say, what we're going to do is we're going to check the line and just make sure that there's nothing coming in either direction. And we'll let you know when it's safe to start up the train again. So they look and they see that there is another train travelling in the same direction on the same tracks. And that train is heading for the circus train. But no panic here, because there's time to warn the train that's coming from behind that they might need to stop. And they do this. So a warning message gets sent to the train that's coming from behind. But the message isn't received by the driver. Okay, so now panic starts to set in. Why hasn't the driver on the train that's coming down the tracks responded? Well, that's because he is asleep at the wheel of the train. The driver of the train that's coming from behind is a man called Sergeant. And he's an experienced train driver. And in this evening, he's actually driving an empty train. It's just 4 carriages, but it's travelling at high speed, and he's fallen asleep behind the wheel. This is because he had eaten a really heavy meal before driving, and he had taken some pills for a kidney problem that he was having. So if we look at this this is often how I can find the best way to look at things. If you look at this from an aerial view, right, if you were standing above the situation, this is what you're looking at. The Wallace Hagenbeck 6-carriage train, filled with over 200 people, is stopped on the tracks because the driver just wants to get out and check something. And approaching behind it at 40 miles an hour is another train, which is empty, and the driver is asleep at the wheel. The train from behind crashes full speed into the back of the circus train, and it tears through the back 4 carriages. The asleep driver, Sergeant, he wakes up and he hits the brakes before it hits the front 2 carriages. The wooden trains, at that time, they were lit by kerosene gas lamps, and fire begins to spread immediately through the train. On impact, bodies were thrown from the train, and people died on the spot. This includes the bodies of children and infants who were travelling with their performing parents. Circus performers from the front two carriages who had been saved of full-on impact raced out in a shaken state to try and pull their fellow circus performers to safety. But a terrible inferno of a fire now engulfed the train. One performer, strongman Bill Wetherington, remembers that he was trying to pull a woman whose body was on fire from the wreck as she screamed, "Save someone else, save the children." The family that I told you about earlier, the Feldmans. The dad, Mr. Feldman, he was thrown from the train while his family, his wife and his two young kids, remained trapped inside the blaze. And he raced back to pull them from it, only to discover that his wife and his two kids had been burned to death. He then took to trying to pull other people from the wreck. Now the fire was spreading so quickly that the circus performers on that train, they had no chance of survival. One of the very few survivors remembers running and just trying to pull people out in any way that was possible, but the fire was making it impossible for people to get near the train. When she was able to talk about it years later, she said, "Bodies were piled one on top of the other and we tried to pull them to safety." She said at one point that she tries to remember pulling a young 20-year-old out of the disaster, and he said to her, "Leave me, please. I'm not going to make it. My body is broken. Go and save someone else." The circus performers caught in the fire were so badly burned that they were utterly unrecognisable. And in the chaos, it just wasn't clear who was dead and who was alive. So the alarm, of course, is raised and local ambulances begin to arrive. The fire department arrive to try and put out the blaze. But by the time that they get there, it's complete carnage. There's just dead bodies lying scattered everywhere. Bodies had been thrown from the train and just lay dead. The emergency services, they worked, but they needed more help. So the local hospital was called, and doctors and nurses and anyone who was available, they ran to the site of the crash, and in their hundreds they tried to save people. For hours, chaos continued. And eventually the sun rose on the horrific sight. A total of 86 performers died in the crash, and 127 were injured badly as a result. Of the 127 who were injured, only 2 ever went on to perform again. At the time, it was the biggest train disaster that had ever happened in the US, and to this day it remains one of the most horrific train disasters on record. Now, if you listen to this podcast regularly, you will know that I bloody love something that makes my heart warm. And this next part does. Did this horrific incident stop the Wallace Hagenbeck Circus performing in Indiana where it was meant to perform? No, it didn't. And I'll tell you why. Because when this happened and the other major circuses around the US heard about the crash, they joined together to do one thing: pay their respects to the dead performers, and this is how they did it. They shipped large amounts of their own equipment, their own performers, their own costumes to Indiana, utterly believing the show must go on. 2 days after that crash, the Wallace Hagenbeck Circus was performing again for audiences. And whilst some said that seemed disrespectful to the nearly 90 people either burned alive or thrown from that train, or their bodies smashed to bits, and the other 130 who lay in hospitals, burned and broken and missing limbs and never able to fucking walk again, some of them. Other circuses said, no, it's the opposite. It's not disrespectful. It's the most respectful thing that we could do, is to honour all of those people by giving them our equipment, our performers, and letting them do what they do best, and that is be a major fucking circus. And so, as a mark of respect and a way to mark that horrible incident, the Hagenbeck Wallace Circus attracted thousands of people to its shows days after that crash. As an act of respect, the National Circus Organisation, didn't know such a thing existed, but there you go. The National Circus Organisation paid a huge amount of money to buy a piece of land in Illinois, which would become the graves of those who died in the train wreck. It was the very first time ever that a mass grave for circus performers ever existed. And 5 days after the crash, almost 60 bodies were buried together in this piece of land. And it became known as Showman's Rest. Now, within Showman's Rest, each person has their own gravestone, and a lot of them read unknown woman, unknown man, unknown child, Baldy, Happy, Horseman, Trapeze Girl. But at least they all got their own gravestone. I know their names aren't on it, but at least they were buried properly. The Showman's Rest site is now open to the public, and in 2019 a record 25,000 people have visited it to pay their respects to those who lost their life that night over 100 years ago. What I love about this story is the sheer humanity of people pulling together when it gets dark, when it gets tough. That we can put aside money and pride and vanity and celebrate the dead and remember that the show must go on. And so ends the story. Alright then, well, hope you enjoyed that story. Yeah, I really enjoyed researching it, so yeah, great. Yes, well, I hope that you did enjoy hearing it, and if you would like to get in touch, talk about it, speak to me, tell me your thoughts, you can. Where can you do it? Well, all the places. Twitter, Instagram, join the Facebook group. I'm always kicking about. Get in touch if you want to. It'd be lovely, lovely to hear from you. I would enjoy this. So yeah, that's about it from me. Until the next time we speak, send you my love, my luck. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. My joy, I'm just saying words. Okay. Okay. For the third time. Okay. Goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face. Let's get it on. Let's do it. Let's get it over. Let's get it on. Let's do it. Let's get it over.